Good evening. Tonight, we confront a crisis that has not only reshaped a nation but has sent shockwaves reverberating across the globe. The war in Ukraine, a conflict that has evolved into a perilous nexus of historical grievances, devastating human cost, and geopolitical brinkmanship. As of January 27, 2025, the situation teeters on a knife's edge. The world watches, waits, and wonders. What future awaits Ukraine? And what does this mean for the global order? To grasp the gravity of the current conflict, we must delve into its roots. The dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 left Ukraine as an independent nation, a development many Russian politicians perceived as a grievous error, a blow to Russia's stature as a great power. The loss of Ukraine was more than territorial. It was symbolic, a perceived diminishment of Russia's superpower image. Fast forward to 2014. Russia's annexation of Crimea and the fomenting of separatist movements in eastern Ukraine marked the beginning of a protracted struggle. These actions were not isolated incidents but part of a broader strategy to reclaim influence over former Soviet territories. Today, Ukraine endures relentless aggression. In the past 48 hours alone, Russian forces have intensified their offensive in the Donetsk region, with significant attacks near Velika Novosilka. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reports that the United States continues its military aid, a lifeline as Ukraine's defense efforts rely heavily on this support. The human toll is staggering. Over January 24 to 25, the Russian army suffered more than 1,600 casualties, with 37 armored combat vehicles and 51 UAVs destroyed. Yet, these numbers, while indicative of Ukraine's resilience, also underscore the ferocity of the conflict. This war is not confined to Ukraine's borders. It is a fulcrum upon which global power balances pivot. The United States, under President Donald Trump, has adopted a more assertive stance against Russian aggression. Promising to end the war swiftly, Trump now pressures Russia with threats of economic sanctions and demands for a resolution, echoing the strategic messaging of Ukraine's President Zelensky. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has expressed readiness for negotiations with President Trump, suggesting a potential meeting. However, Ukrainian President Zelensky jesting a potential meeting. However, Ukrainian President Zelensky remains cautious, recognizing that any negotiation involving Trump and Putin could redefine Ukraine's fate, and not necessarily to its benefit. What's at stake here is far beyond Ukraine's sovereignty. It's the global perception of power dynamics. Trump's re-emergence onto the world stage has sent ripples through the geopolitical sphere. His unpredictable nature and transactional diplomacy could lead to swift deals, but at what cost? Some fear that Trump, in his effort to resolve the conflict, might pressure Ukraine into concessions that undermine its territorial integrity, favoring a facade of peace over true resolution. Let's examine the economic reverberations of this war. Energy prices have soared across Europe due to Russia's weaponization of its gas exports. European nations scramble to secure alternative energy sources, facing the harsh reality of winter with diminished reserves. Trump, during his earlier presidency, emphasized American energy dominance, something he promises to revive should he return to the Oval Office. This promise could either bolster NATO allies by flooding the market with US energy or create further chaos in a global market already destabilized. On the other hand, Russia's economic resilience, propped up by alliances with China and India, keeps the Kremlin afloat. This ongoing tug-of-war between sanctions and survival creates ripple effects that touch every corner of the globe, from inflation in the West to food insecurity in the global South. Trump's stance on NATO, too, becomes a critical factor. His historical skepticism of the alliance raises questions about whether he would maintain US commitments to Article 5, NATO's collective defense clause. A perceived weakening of NATO's unity could embolden Putin to escalate the conflict, potentially targeting other former Soviet states like Moldova or even the Baltics. The specter of a wider European war looms. Simultaneously, reports of potential nuclear escalations create an atmosphere of global dread. Trump's previous relationships with autocrats like Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin showcased his willingness to engage in high-stakes diplomacy. However, this approach, marked by unpredictability and theatrics, could heighten the risk of miscalculation in a world already teetering on the edge. Ladies and gentlemen, amidst the grand geopolitical narratives, we must not lose sight of the human tragedy unfolding. Over 10 million Ukrainians have been displaced. Cities like Bakhmut and Mariupol bear scars that may never heal. Entire generations grow up knowing nothing but war. Yet, the Ukrainian people remain unbroken. Stories of resilience abound, citizens converting basements into bomb shelters, soldiers holding the line against overwhelming odds, and humanitarian workers risking their lives to deliver aid. This is not merely a war for land. It is a battle for identity, democracy, and the right of a nation to determine its destiny. And now, the Trump doctrine casts its shadow. His promise of a swift resolution resonates with war-weary Americans and Ukrainians alike. But let us not forget the cost of such resolutions in the past. Alliances shaken, trust eroded, and adversaries emboldened. Trump's transactional style could lead to a deal that prioritizes optics over substance, a ceasefire that freezes the conflict rather than resolves it. This could leave Ukraine fractured, with its eastern territories effectively under Russian control and a precedent set for future aggression. Or, conversely, Trump could escalate US involvement, risking direct confrontation with Russia. Either path carries monumental risks, with consequences that could ripple across the globe for decades. The war in Ukraine is not merely a conflict between two nations. It is a crucible in which the future of the global order is being forged. The return of Donald Trump to the international stage introduces new uncertainties and potential flashpoints. His actions, or inactions, will determine whether this crisis escalates into a broader catastrophe or finds a tenuous resolution. As we stand at this crossroads, the question is not just what the future holds for Ukraine, but what it holds for all of us. Will history remember this as the moment the world united to uphold justice and sovereignty, or the moment it faltered under the weight of ambition and division? Stay vigilant. Stay informed. This is Zoe Kolode, reporting for the Lion's Roar. Good night.